Welcome back to the Emerging Minds podcast. As you probably know, our funding call is currently open. The deadline is February 21st. We are hoping to encourage interdisciplinary research projects across sectors. So with this in mind, we asked Pam Miller from the NSPCC, who is also a member of our leadership team, to give some advice to academics and early career researchers who may wish to approach a third sector organisation. Here's what she had to say.
Hello, I am Pam Miller. I am a member of the Emerging Minds leadership team, and I also am Interim Head of Research at the NSPCC. I have developed these few slides in conjunction with some of the other members of the leadership team at Emerging Minds and some other third sector organizations to talk about how you can most effectively engage with the voluntary and community sector when you're approaching them for research. So the first thing I wanted to speak with you about is some things that you should know when you're approaching a voluntary and community sector organizations. First thing is we're all very different organizations of very different sizes, as you will know, but regardless, we all have strategic goals that drive our work. We want to further research because that's how impact is made, but we also need to stay true to our organization's missions and goals when considering research. So while your interesting idea that isn't related to our work is great, we can't always say yes to things that don't fit with our strategic goals. It's also important to understand that our budgets are tight and tied to very specific activities, and any requests that require staff time need to be funded from somewhere, whether it's from you or from some other fund that we have that allows us to do this type of work. Often people don't understand that, so when they say, we just need you to help us find participants for our research, you're just a gatekeeper. That does take staff time, and so that makes it really difficult for us when we're getting many requests. Our planning and budget cycles may mean that it's difficult for us to commit to activities that are not in plan and budget or too far in the future. And we know this is frustrating for you. It's also frustrating for us, but that's how our budgeting and planning cycles work. We also get many requests for our support, and we can't do it all. So approaches that appear tokenistic are often the first ones to get turned down. And so when I get to the next slide, I'll talk to you about how you might want to make your approach, but just make sure that you're clear about what it is you want for us to look at. We also have our own internal governance processes, so don't expect us to respond in a day or two to requests that you make, particularly around letters of support. Many of us have internal processes to make sure that if we write a letter of support, that it actually is a robust piece of research that we want to be included in. I can't tell you the number of times I've had someone write and say, this application for a grant needs to be submitted tomorrow. Please, can you just sign this letter that I've written for you? I can't do that, and many organizations can't do that because we have to make sure that we can commit to the research that's being proposed. We are experts in our areas, but some organizations and some staff can be quite intimidated by or overly deferential to academics. So it's just really important to remember when you're approaching a third sector organization that there are power dynamics going on both ways, and to think about that in your approach. And we want to be considered as more than just potential providers of research participants. We have a wealth of experience, and it would be important for us and for you to consider how else we might be able to support you in your work. So here are some principles that I've developed along with some other members of the third sector community on how to approach us. So the first thing is, do your due diligence and tailor your request. Research the organization and know what we do and what we can potentially offer before you approach us. So an example from the NSPCC is I've had a number of requests from academics for us to provide adult survivors of abuse for their research. That's not the service users that we have. That's not what we can help with. And immediately that makes me think that that person has not done their due diligence to know what we can offer. Proof your communication. Don't send the NSPCC an email that says, I know that Action for Children does this. Often we all see where people are sending out several emails and you may have a template and you're just swapping in the organization's name. That's okay if you're making an initial approach, as long as it's also very specific to the organization. But make sure you get the organization's name right. Make sure that if you're talking about their mission or vision, you actually have their mission or vision and not someone else's. Also, consider what you can offer the organization. Now, that might be funding, but you can also be very creative. So we often will ask for funding if we think it's going to be an extensive piece of work that will require our staff to spend time either doing, we've had requests to pull case records and to anonymize them. That doesn't happen without staff time. Or if you want us to do some communication work for you, all of this takes time and effort. But you might not have funding that you can offer. You could offer a seminar or a workshop on the work that you're doing. It might be a way for you to kind of skill up or get research out to staff in local organizations, and that's quite effective, and many organizations would welcome that kind of interaction. Consider the breadth of the work of the organization and value their experience. So at the NSPCC, we have a number of channels for communicating with professionals. So maybe you could provide a practice-based summary of your research for us to help disseminate. Or we also have a library, so it may be something that you give us that we could put in our library. So there are a number of different ways that we could provide help and experience. We also do a lot of campaigning work, so maybe it's possible that some of your work would be useful in our campaigning work. So just think about how what you're doing fits with all the different areas of the organization you're approaching. Consider involving the organization early in the development of your project, but be careful that that's not a tokenistic type of request. So some organizations will want to be involved and helping you shape your research proposal. Others just want to be informed as you go along, but make sure that the organization you're working with is clear about what it is you're doing and you're clear about the type of involvement they want. And the other thing that's really key is to be quite specific in your ask and include any known deadlines. We often get what we would consider almost phishing emails from academics who say, oh, I'm thinking about doing this type of research. What do you think about it? And it's unclear whether they're writing us to ask whether we would fund it, whether we would want to be involved in the dissemination of that research, whether we want to be involved as a gatekeeper. And so those are often the emails that are kind of get shuffled to the bottom of the pile because it will take time for us to unpick with you what it is you want. If you can be really clear, that is so much more helpful because then we know what it is you're asking. You might not know exactly what it is you need, but just be clear that you're open to a discussion. And again, deadlines are really important because if you've got a deadline that's in a couple of weeks, that's important for us to know. Or if it's in a few days, again, that makes it much more difficult for us. But we also don't want to spend time reviewing something and then to find out the deadline's passed because you asked us and didn't give us a deadline. So that's the end of my presentation. I know that there may be other questions. Feel free to contact me. You can find me on the Emerging Minds website. Thank you.
Big thank you to Pam Miller for talking to us today. It's great to have these really helpful pointers, and it's good as well to know about the common pitfalls to avoid. Whether or not you're planning to apply for a funding call, this is extremely relevant advice for anyone planning interdisciplinary research in the future. If you're seeking further information, we really recommend heading over to our website, emergingminds.org.uk. But if you have specific questions, especially questions for Pam Miller, we would ask that you email info@emergingminds.org. Now, if you want to keep up to date, we would like it if you did. You can follow us on Twitter or Instagram at Emerging Minds UK. And we'd also recommend signing up for our monthly newsletter, Network News. Thank you so much for listening. Bye-bye.